Hello everybody out there watching on YouTube, and welcome to race number 17 of Season 5 of the NNSCRA Marvel Studios Cup Series. I'm Levi McIntyre, the voice of the NNSCRA Marvel Studios Cup Series, here to welcome you to the Old Spice 20-minute endurance race here at Old Spice Raceway, as we are getting set for potentially 25 laps, but still the 20-minute endurance race. 25 laps is going to be very close for the cusp of the 20-minute time limit, considering it takes between 46 and 48 seconds to get around this racetrack, and we're going to keep that in consideration. But before we take a look at the starting lineup, which I know there's going to be a lot of chatter about, let's take a look at the top 10 and the points coming into the race today. So after last week at Blue Ridge, Joshua Collard extended his points lead to 36 points over Carson Gum. Third is the pole sitter for today, Dylan Jacobs. Fourth, Paul Minnick. Fifth, Benjamin Miles. Sixth, Sean Galligan. Seventh, last week's winner, Dylan Poteet. Eighth, Dougie Shears. Ninth, James Qualls. 10th, DJ Curtis. As far as who were the big winners and losers of the point standings after last week at Blue Ridge, the big loser, unfortunately, was Jake Baskinger, who fell from 21st to 34th after Blue Ridge. And we had two big winners. Rafael Leduc and Zachary Fitzwater both moved up 8 spots from 29th and 32nd in points, respectively. But without further ado, let's take a look at the starting lineup for today's race. Starting in the last row is Colin Phillips and Trent Dunham. And here's where the pots are gonna get stirred, because look at that front row. Frenemies, essentially. Dylan Jacobs starting on the pole, his first pole of the season. And starting next to him is Rafael Leduc. I wonder what kind of racing those two are going to put on with each other. So we got teammates in row 1. Then you got teammates in row 2, Emmanuel Hardnett and Carson Gum. Then row 3, Cody Lamas and Chris Dollarton. Row 4, Zachary Fitzwater, Matt McIntyre. And then row 5, Jake Baskinger and Jake Rogers. 2 Jakes right there and then. But let's go ahead and get the command to fire engines for the Old Spice 20-minute endurance event here at Old Spice.
Drivers, start your engines.
All 40 drivers rolling on the racetrack to get this event started. And of course, once we cross the start-finish line here, will be when the 20-minute timer will be shown on your screens. As we are waiting to get to the hairpin right around here, and then we shall get this race underway. Now, a couple drivers you're going to have to keep an eye out for because of momentum or just trying to get wins. Guys like Emmanuel Hardnett, Cody Lamas. Boogity, boogity, boogity! Let's go racing! And I completely forgot to unmute, and I just wasted a whole dialogue line right there. But yeah, Dylan Jacobs got 3 bonus points right there. 2 for getting the pole, 1 for leading a lap. And I was saying when my mic got muted that Dylan Jacobs so far has had a consistent season despite only 1 top 5 finish this season, 6 top 10s and an average finish of 14.75. And he moved up from 5th to 3rd after a good top 10 finish at Blue Ridge last week. And he's trying to go for his first win of the season, and typically road courses are one of a couple different track types he really strives at. And at the line, he leads by a little over a second as he continues to pull away from second place Emmanuel Hartnett. Now Emmanuel Hartnett, on the other hand, he's had a bit of a bumpy season despite getting a victory earlier this season. He fell to 16th in points after last week at Blue Ridge. Right now in 3rd. And then behind him is the guy who's had the worst season so far this season, Cody Lamas, as he's dead last in the points despite getting a win. He's still dead last in points and is 37 points behind 39th in the championship standings. Right now, top 3 run going for him. Rafael Leduc, who sort of got a bit of momentum on his side, moved up 8 spots in points, up to 21st right now. Having a solid top 5 run going for himself. He did start 2nd, but from that initial start, he just fell back like a rock. But right now, still running top 5, still going to be a plenty of points for him going forward. And then right behind him, in 5th, is 2nd in points, Carson Gum. Now, Carson Gum's sort of been in the shadow of Joshua Collard for a good portion of the season, despite having a win, unlike Collard. Statistic-wise, he's just not been as consistent. 5 top 5s, however, but 7 top 10s and an average finish of 14.56. And he's 36 points behind Joshua Collard, and I'm sure we're going to get to him eventually. And then right behind him in the 6th position, I know it's hard for me to say 6th. 6th. There we go. 6th. There we go. In the 6th position, as I screwed it up again, is Chris Dollarton. And Dollarton comes into this race 27th in points, and he's had a rough season. Only 1 top 10 finish this season. And right now he's got a top 10 run going right now in that 6th position. Right behind him is Zachary Fitzwater. Fitzwater coming into this race, and he moved up 8 spots in points from 32nd to 24th, like I mentioned earlier. Has a win, but other than that win, he's kind of struggled. Right now, 7th on the racetrack, and we'll see if he could stay up there for the rest of the race. And then right behind him is, like I said earlier, the big loser in the points after Blue Ridge, who fell from 21st to 34th, Jake Baskinger. And Baskinger, yes, pretty much safe to say he has struggled pretty much all season long, despite a couple good finishes. Right now, just not where he needs to be in the points. And then you got Matt McIntyre, who has really kind of suffered since that 2-win streak that he had early in the season. He won back at Las Vegas and California, 2 in a row, the first of 2 drivers to win 2 races in a row this season. But he fell over the course of about the last 5 or 6 races. Matt McIntyre's fallen from out of the top 10 to 29th in points. So he has not had particularly a great season since the start. But right now, this is his best run he's had going since the early part of the season. Right now running in 9th. And then right behind him, rounding out the top 10 currently, James Shelley. And James Shelley, he's been in the hunt to get into the top 10 in points over the last few races. It's just some inconsistency has kind of hindered him, as he fell from 14th to 15th after last week at Blue Ridge, but right now having a good run in the 10th position. Now let's get on to the rest of the field. Next up, Jake Rogers. Now, Jake Rogers this season, for him at least, has been stepping up over the last few weeks. He has a win, and he comes into this race 13th in points, and he's only 7 points outside the top 10. And we're getting down to the wire of drivers needing to get some quality runs to get into the top 10 in points in hopes of getting into this season's chase. And right now, Rogers is one of the lead contenders to try and get into the top 10. Right behind him, one of the most consistent drivers in this entire series history. He's been top 10 in points, I believe, the last 2 or 3 seasons, Sean Galligan, and he comes in 6th in the championship standings, and he's been pretty consistent despite a couple of bad finishes and being in some wrecks. He's had a lot of good runs, and he's been top 10 in points relatively all season long, even going back to Daytona. And speaking of Daytona, that's where we're heading to next week. So that should be exciting. Right behind him, Ethan Hoffman. Now, Ethan Hoffman has been in that close to the rookie points lead battle, despite still being the only driver this season to have not gotten a top 10 finish, and he's 37th in points. Then again, the rookies in general have had bad seasons so far. Hoffman right now running in 13th, not exactly where he'd want to finish. Then right behind him, Dylan Young in the 2. Now, Dylan Young had a pretty rough Blue Ridge race last week. In fact, I believe he was one of the bottom 5 that didn't get points, and he fell from 7th to 12th. But he's only 4 points out of the cutoff, so he's still within reach. So definitely still got to keep an eye out on him. And then speaking of top 10 in points, there's Dougie Shears in the 83. And like I talked about earlier with Matt McIntyre, Shears is the second of 2 drivers to go 2 wins in a row this season. And if I can remember correctly, it was Talladega and Kansas for Dougie Shears. And pretty much ever since then, he's been consistently hanging on into the top 10 in points. And this has been by far Dougie Shears' best season he's had in a long time on this channel. Not just this series, but in this channel. And his future for the Marvel Studios Cup Series is kind of unknown right now. We're not entirely sure where he's going to be ending up as far as a ride, if he's even coming back at all. In fact, the roster itself for Season 6 has not been 100% finalized. Anything can still change, and Shears could still find himself in a ride. Right behind him, Jay Jefferson in the 87. Jay Jefferson has, similar to Chris Dollarton, been struggling. Despite moving up into the top 20, he's only had 1 top 10 finish. And right now he's having an okay day, not wrecked, but not in the top 10. He's just kind of there right now. Speaking of top 10 in points, here's the driver that came in 4th in points, Paul Minnick. Paul Minnick right now having a average race, but still he can, if there are pit stops, which I'm not sure if they're going to have to pit before the end of the race, I highly doubt it, but if, say, they have to pit, he could maybe capitalize on that. Right behind him, a driver who is really fallen off the radar since the start of the season, Tim Fiegel. Kind of like the more brutal version of what's happened to Matt McIntyre, where Fiegel, for about the first 8 or so races, Fiegel was top 10 in points and was consistent. Now he's 35th in points. In fact, he was the second biggest loser in the points after Blue Ridge. He fell from 25th to 35th in points. So he's definitely going to really have to ratchet it up big time if he's going to have any chance at all, and it's going to be a major long shot for him to still try and get into the chase. Right behind him is Kyle Matthews. Now, Kyle Matthews, he's had a couple of good finishes, but he's been struggling to remain consistent and get that victory. In fact, he fell to 26th in points after Blue Ridge last week, and right now he's not faring too well. James Quall's up here, and he's lapped down. I wonder if there was a wreck, and I knew I saw some skid marks on the racetrack, so we'll have to look further into that when we get through the rest of the field. But next up, Preston Plord to round out the top 20 right now. Nearly got into quals right there. But Preston Plord, he's really kind of been up and down, and he's 22nd in points. Only 2 top 10s to his credit. Then you got Seth Cole. Now, Seth Cole, he is really struggled. Despite having 4 very good top 10 finishes, similar to a lot of other drivers, he's just struggled to remain consistent or ends up in a lot of accidents. And the same can be said for the defending series champion Joshua Sekuli. However, over the course of the last few weeks, he has rebounded. In fact, at one point early in the season, he was dead last in the point standings. Right now, he's 19th, and he's only about 33 points outside the top 10, so still plenty of time for the 11 car to get himself back into the top 10 in points and try to defend that championship. Next up, Dylan Thoreau. Now, this is more likely going to be, at least for the time being, Dylan Thoreau's farewell season for the Marvel Studios Cup Series, at least for one season hiatus, or he could come back sometime, or this could actually be it for him. And right now, for his potential farewell season, not that great. 25th in points coming into the race today. Right behind him, Patrick Smith. This is his final season, and he's just 17th in points. He's had a lot of good runs, but he's struggled to try and get that win. But he's still very close to making the top 10 in points. So, still anything can happen. And then, right behind him, Jonathan Zorling. What a turnaround from a season ago, where Zorling was barely able to make many races. Right now, I mean, despite not running too strong right now, he came into this race 11th in points, 3 out of the cutoff. But I'm afraid he's going to lose ground as a result of today. As I look at the timer, we got about 5.5 minutes left in this race, so we're getting down to the wire. Next up, James McLeod, who fell out of the top 10 in points after Blue Ridge, fell to 14th, but still within reach. And then you got his teammate and Blue Ridge winner Dylan Poteet, who moved up to 7th in points, but I think could end up falling a couple spots because he's right now 27th. Benjamin Miles, top 5 in points, I believe 5th in points, and then there's the points leader, Joshua Collard, and he's going to end up losing a big chunk of that points lead after this race today. In fact, I see a buckle on his hood, so that tells me he was a car involved in something. And then rounding out the top 30, Colin Francis, who, like the other rookies, has just been not very good, 31st in points, though he is the highest of all 5 rookies in the standings. Then as far as remaining drivers, Ryan Butcher, similarly to the other rookies, not that good this season. Anthony McCrory, who's in 32nd, he comes into this race 30th in points. He's just been struggling. Then you got Alex Drayton. Despite a lot of good finishes, he's just been inconsistent and is right now 18th in points, but still within reach of getting into the top 10. Daytona 500 winner Jessica Sheldon, pretty much almost ever since then, she's just been up and down, 23rd in points coming in. Then Colin Phillips, pretty much the same story as the other rookies. Then you got Trent Dunham, who's right now the first of the bottom 5, and 39th in points. He's just been having a terrible season. Diego Yepes, similar to the other rookies. And then James Qualls, last week and this week, struggled or involved in a wreck, and I feel like he's going to end up falling out of the top 10 in points. And then the rest of the drivers out of the race from incidents, Charles Sanford, who has struggled, and then DJ Curtis, who was 10th in points, now is going to probably end up falling out of the top 10. But we got 3 minutes left in this race, and it's 3 laps to go here at Old Spice. So I feel like it's going to be very, very, very close as to when these drivers are going to cross the line, and will the timer expire before the lap is complete. I feel like that could be a case, but Dylan Jacobs has led every single lap, dominated, and is gonna, if he can still hang on up here and not make a major mistake and crash, he could end up with maximum points, 54 points, I believe. Yeah, 54 points. That's the maximum of points you can get in a race. If you get the pole, lead a lap, and lead the most laps, that's 4 bonus points to your already 50 points. 2 laps to go, and 2 minutes left in this race. So it looks like the timer will run out after the 25 laps have concluded. So first time this season, the timer for an endurance race will expire after laps have been completed. As we're getting ready to come across the line for the white flag, and we still, well, we're getting ready to get to that point. Coming through the hairpin right now for the 78. And the white flag is waving, and still 90 seconds left. And they're going to get through half of that time here in just about 35 seconds. But yeah, Dylan Jacobs looks like he's going to finally get his first win this season and keep his streak continuing of winning a race, excluding Season 1. I don't remember if he won a race in Season 1, but since Season 2, he has managed to get at least 1 win. And in fact, next season, this team's going to go under a complete overhaul as far as the name and stuff like that. But we're coming through the hairpin, and the checkered flag is getting ready to wave. Checkered flag with 40 seconds left. Dylan Jacobs wins the Old Spice 20-minute endurance here at Old Spice Raceway. Dominating performance. Nobody challenged him all day long, and he comes through with the W, his first W of the season. And he's going to really gain on the points lead going into Daytona next week, which I can't wait for. But as far as the rest of the top 10, Emmanuel Hartnett, great performance in the second position. That's going to definitely put him close to getting into the top 10 in points. Cody Lamas, much wanted good finish in the top 5 there. Rafael Leduc, his momentum continues. He gets a 4th place finish. And then Carson Gunn with a top 5 finish, and he's going to be another one that's going to close in on the points lead as well. Chris Dollerton with his 2nd top 10 finish this season. Zachary Fitzwater, momentum's going to continue for him, finishing in 7th. Jake Baskinger, much needed run in 9th. Matt McIntyre, hopefully this will start an upward path for him to try and get into the chase. And then James Shelley rounding out the top 10. Then there's your top 20, top 30. And then the rest of the drivers with points. And then the bottom 5 for this week were Trent Denham, Diego Yepes, James Qualls, Charles Sanford, and DJ Curtis. Well, that does it for our coverage today here at Old Spice Raceway. Thank you so much for watching. We head back to Daytona next week. But until then, here are your results, rookie points and regular points heading into Daytona. And this is Levi McIntyre signing off.